Hello and welcome to another edition of Critical Q&A, the show where I answer your questions based on what you've left for me in the comments section of my Q&A videos or have sent to me by email at askchrisshelton@gmail.com. This is our post-Halloween episode. I hope all of you enjoyed the daylight savings and extra hour that we got last night, and that your Halloween went great. And hopefully you don't see too many Christmas decorations up today. Ugh. So without further ado, I think we're just going to get right into the questions because I've got some beefy ones this week. Here we go. GS. Scientology is very expensive. I think Ron said an intensive should cost either 1 week's or 1 month's salary from the general public. Are the prices different in different countries in order to match the income of the denizens of that country? If a miracle happened and someone independently figured out how to actually go clear and demonstrate OT abilities and wrestled control of the church from COB, the crime organization boss, would you be willing to take DM's place and run the church and fix the problems you have so clearly exposed? In Scientology, auditing is sold by the hour. In fact, it's sold by blocks of 12.5 hours, and that amount of auditing is referred to as an intensive because it's supposed to be intensively delivered. According to what Hubbard said, that meant delivered within a week's period of time. Within 7 days, 12.5 hours of auditing was supposed to be delivered. That would mean that a person would go in, say, 5 nights a week for 2.5 hours a night, or they'd go in like all weekend, or a combination of those things. So that is the basic block of how auditing is delivered and sold in Scientology, and that's how it's charged for. It's not charged for by every hour, it's charged by that block. So a person in the United States, say, might pay $4,000 for an intensive of auditing. But because of Hubbard's advice that auditing be charged for based on, I think it was a month's income, was supposed to pay for one intensive. I think that's what it was. It seems, I could be wrong about that though, but it was something like that. Based on that, different countries charge different amounts for the auditing. It's not like if it's $4,000 in the United States, they run the exchange rate and that's how much they charge in Mexico. Instead, they actually price it lower, say in Mexico or South America or Europe or Asia or wherever, based on the cost of living. And so this is kind of amusing because what this led to when I was running and administering all of the auditing and training and delivery in the Western United States, often I would run into people in the US who found it cheaper to get their auditing by flying down to Mexico or flying down to South America and getting their auditing down there because the rates were so significantly less. And of course, Americans can afford to pay a lot more down in Latin America than they can up in the US because the intensives were charged less down there. So it's not the case that it's the same everywhere you go. I don't know anything about European rates, Australia, UK, because the only one I was ever exposed to were the US rates and the ones in South America. Now, as far as the second half of your question, since you're doing a twofer here, I understand that your question is that if CLEAR really existed and there was an organization like the Church of Scientology that could deliver that kind of thing, would I go back into it in order to, cancel disconnection or something like that and run it? That's a pretty theoretical question because it depends on all kinds of things that don't exist. But I don't see that I would ever go back into the Church of Scientology as a staff member or executive or administrator, and certainly not to run the thing. I would never associate myself with anything connected with the word Scientology ever again. So, the idea of clears and OTs and some group coming up with that, if some group in the world actually came up with the ability to provide supernatural powers and abilities to people, I might get behind that. I might be kind of interested in that, but nothing like that's ever going to be connected with Scientology. So the question's a little too theoretical for me. So, Miriam Laura, I've never quite understood the need for that many people on post, especially for the really small orgs. With all due respect, but some of the tasks sound like things I can knock out in one afternoon by myself. Can you please clarify what it is that a typical staff member does all day? Moreover, now that there is less public to be had, are orgs cutting back on the number of staff? I've sometimes wondered if staff was hired to make the orgs look fuller and busier than they really were, and if staff members are given busy work to justify their presence. I mean no disrespect, I'm aware that staff members work their tails off to meet the goals, quotas they're given, but it does appear like mismanagement of resources from the outside looking in. A full complement for what Miscavige called the ideal organizations, any Church of Scientology really, numbered, anywhere 110, 120 staff, something like that. I'm quoting him when I give those numbers. Organizations can run as Scientology organizations can be as small as 3 staff members. That's pretty much the minimum number in order to follow the organizational structure that Hubbard laid out, would be 3 guys. Hubbard's organizational system is pretty specialized, and it's got a special organizing board that has things broken down into divisions, and I'm not going to give a whole seminar here on that organizing board or how it's all broken down, because you can look that up. But as far as what staff do all day, I can definitely address that. Despite all the glossy promo and all these policy letters, thousands and thousands of them, and all those different directions that go to organizations, what staff members are actually directed to do all day is pretty much make money. And they're either making money to pay the bills for the place that they're in order to keep the lights on, or the doors open, or pay their rent. And above and beyond that, and sometimes in lieu of that, because of the pressure that comes down, they are demanded to make money for the International Association of Scientologists. That's the membership organization for Scientology. It's the membership group. You are supposed to be a member of the IAS when you're a Scientologist, and you pay for that privilege. So there's constant fundraising going on in order to get people to increase their status in the IAS. And almost exclusively now, that's what Scientology staff and Scientologists are talked to about. There's talk about services and whatnot, and people, of course, go into Scientology in order to do services or buy books and study them and study the materials, and of course do the auditing, right? Those kind of services. So organizational staff, there's a staff member whose job it is to sell people those services. That person's obviously doing that all day. They're calling people on the phone and trying to sell them those services or sell them books and materials, right? CDs, lectures, things like that. So that's kind of, easy to understand that somebody's going to be doing that all day. There are also staff members who deliver the services. There's course supervisors, kind of like teachers in a way. They supervise the classes and make sure that the students are understanding what they're studying. Then there are the counselors, the auditors, and those guys are supposed to be working all day actually delivering Dianetics and Scientology services, counseling to people. And so that goes on. Then you have everything that kind of, the rest of the organization is really supposed to be a support system for that auditing to happen. In Scientology, all roads lead to auditing. So everything that's going on in the organization is supposed to be making auditing happen. But since about the late 90s, mid to late 90s, organizations have been steered off of that direction mostly. And like I said, more and more the case has been that they've been pressured to sell books, sell lectures, and mostly, though, do fundraising for the IAS or for this whole ideal org strategy where they are doing fundraising to buy a new church building and then raising funds to renovate it. And a lot of pressure and a lot of attention is put on that, to the point where most of the staff, no matter what their job is, they're spending some or all of their day doing that fundraising. And it was the amount of pressure, the amount of attention that was going on that, and the exclusiveness of the attention on that, like that's all anybody seemed to be caring about, was that fundraising, that got me going, this is off the rails. This whole organization has kind of gone on a big shift over this way. And I was very turned off by it because it's not what I thought Scientology was all about when I first joined it. So that's all 100% Miscavige. He's pushed it in that direction. As I've said before, Scientology was always about making money. Hubbard wanted money, but he expected that money would be gotten by selling and delivering the services and the materials. And he wasn't into the whole fundraising thing. He never called for that, as far as I know. And I never read any policies that Hubbard was about fundraising purely for straight donations. And in fact, I read policies where he said that was ridiculous and canceled it. So anyway, that's what I can talk about with that. So that's kind of what staff do most of the day. And so, you have a receptionist, and you have a bookstore officer, and you have a salesperson, and you have, executives who administer these various areas and divisions, and you have a whole section of the organization where people are getting new people in, right? That's called the public divisions, or Div 6, the sixth division in that organizing board. Now, your regular church organization, like I've been talking about here, like the one in Tampa or the one in Denver or Las Vegas, these organizations have this external pressure to do all this fundraising. And that's where the real mismanagement comes from, because the guys on the ground in the churches, generally speaking, want to just show up and kind of do their jobs. Now, the other thing is that a lot of them are not very highly trained on their jobs. And the training they do get is all in Hubbard's management system, which sucks because, and I don't mean it sucks that they're trained in it, I mean the system itself sucks. And the proof of that is, of course, look at the organizations. They're all empty, when the whole goal of the organizations are to be full and expanding. Now, there's two reasons for that. One, the management system, the organizing system itself sucks, and external management, which, from the continental level or the international level, the Sea Org members who are giving orders to these organizations, for the most part, have no idea how to run an organization. They've never worked a day in their life in an organization, and if they have, they didn't run them. So they don't really know what they're doing in managing these organizations. But more importantly, all of the Sea Org and all of the staff are being pushed in this direction of fundraising and making money for the IAS. So that's the real mismanagement that occurs with these organizations that drives them off of what they're supposed to be doing. Now, with all of the PR, the horrible press and bad PR and everything about Scientology over the last 10, 12 years or so, they've also got a real situation with going out and even talking to people and trying to convince them to come in, because people don't want anything to do with Scientology. And that's a third aspect of why these organizations are so empty. So combined, all of these things guarantee organizational failure. And that's what we see going on with Scientology. And I did do a whole video about the structure of organizations and management and whatnot, and I will put the link to that in the notes section of this video. So if you have any question as to what goes on with the management of the organizations and why it's so crazy and off the rails, I explain that fully there. So, and that's like a 45-minute video, so I'm not going to repeat all that here. Oak Tree. A Hubbard management consultant is active in our local business community. He got his hands on my business card 3 years ago, and the emails haven't stopped since. He's friendly enough, and I'll give him high marks for persistence. However, I have real concerns about his qualifications to do consulting work that requires a high degree of education, integrity, and trust. Here's an interesting quote from the WISE website advertising for new Hubbard management practitioners. A hugely rewarding career, Hubbard management consultants not only help businesses flourish, they help individuals succeed and achieve their lifelong goals. Whether it is helping a bright young business owner get off on the right foot, or rescuing the family firm that's been handed down generation to generation, or straightening out the accounting office that's all but captured its owner from his wife and children, the accomplishments of consultants reach out, touching all areas of people's lives. That is a highly personal and perhaps even intrusive statement of what a family business consultant might do. Capturing its owners from his wife and children seems like some weird imagery to make the point. So is the Hubbard management consultant the right guy to do the job? No way. Consultants aren't certified public accountants. They aren't lawyers. They don't train in any normal business school. The Hubbard School of Management is unaccredited, has no transferable units, and has not one single course on financial accounting. Yet we expect him to straighten out the accounting office? What's going on with these people? Does Hubbard management have anything worthy to offer, or is it yet another dangerous trend spawned by the destructive cult of Scientology? Well, you pretty much nailed it in asking the question. You've pretty much answered it, because they are not accredited, they are not trained, they don't know what the hell they're doing except for whatever training they've been given on Hubbard's management system. And as I mentioned in my last answer, that management system sucks. It does not result in a high level of production and success and expansion for any organization that uses it. It's more like if any success or expansion happens, that's done despite the Hubbard management system, not because of it. And the statistics, the whole thing of managing by production statistics, is just disastrous in what it does to people's morale and their ability to get their jobs done, because trying to constantly produce more and more and more week after week after week becomes an impossibility and sets everybody up for a fail, and makes the managers have to become rather draconian in running those staff, because they have to become slave masters on these people, beating on them to get more and more production out of them. So and that of course leads to criminal activity and people falsifying their statistics, and it's a whole vicious cycle that Hubbard kind of set up. So that's the problem with the system itself. Now, as far as these wise consultants go, yeah, these guys they don't have any idea what they're doing, or if they do have any idea of what they're doing, it's because they were businessmen themselves, or some of them do have some business education and they're using that information and implementing Hubbard's system, but more so just giving some kind of common sense sort of direction. What most people don't realize is that the whole system of WISE, the World Institute of Scientology Enterprises, it's shortened down to WISE, is not originally set up to do management consulting for outside businesses. That was not its purpose. Hubbard set up WISE in order to get Scientologists to stop preying on the org staff, because what was happening was some Scientology businessmen were going into organizations and they were poaching staff members, and they were also selling their wares or their products or their services in the churches using, they met Scientologists and they would sell Scientologists their own outside business activities. And this became something that, Hubbard didn't like at all, because it was taking money away from him as far as he was concerned. And so WISE was set up as a police type organization to get this under control and get people out of the organizations who he described as preying on them. So this whole WISE management consultant thing was an afterthought to what WISE was set up for in the first place. And this and the other Scientology front groups are something that I should probably do a video on at some point when I get some time, to kind of explain the origins and activities and purposes of each one of the different front groups, because Scientology has about, 5 or 6 of them. And they seem to have this nice PR, statement of what they do and how they're reaching out to the world to solve its ills and all that. But really, the only reason any of them exist is to funnel people into the Church of Scientology and get them paying Scientology and get that money from them. So all this other stuff is just kind of ancillary. Even if kind of like the staff in the churches believe what they're doing, the WISE consultants kind of believe what they're doing, but that was never part of what that activity was supposed to be for. And so anyway, as far as credentials and anything goes for these guys, I've known WISE consultants, I've seen them, I've even done work myself, not as a WISE consultant, but that kind of thing, advising people in companies, Scientologists who, when I was in the church, I would go out sometimes and try to help people who had their own businesses using Hubbard's management organization information. And I found myself in over my head very quickly. I had no idea what I was talking about, but I pretended I did and thought I did because of what I'd read from Hubbard. So I wouldn't trust these guys at all. They're not the real thing. And I would stay as far away from any organization that is associated with Scientology. I would stay away from them and run in the other direction as fast as I could. Anonymous. In a video, you mentioned LRH's Affirmations. There are a number of odd aspects to the Affirmations that lead me to believe they were not written by LRH. The biggest is that it simply doesn't read like LRH. It has some bits of Scientology-sounding phrases peppered in, though I just don't hear LRH when I read the Affirmations. Then there's Armstrong's desire to get back at Scientology, the lack of an original for the Affirmations, and the conflicts within Armstrong's story. What do you think? What leads you to believe they are authentic? I have no doubts, personally, that the Affirmations, as revealed by Jerry Armstrong, are 100% Hubbard's writings. They were originally put into the court record, and they were read out over the strong objections of the church's lawyers. The documents that were read out were written in L. Ron Hubbard's handwriting. They were not typed documents. And the church actually stated in court that they were written by L. Ron Hubbard. Now, later, the church backtracked on that and said that they were not written by L. Ron Hubbard. However, when the court case drew to a close, this is a 1984 case against Jerry Armstrong, the church demanded that Jerry return all handwritten or all original and copies of the Affirmations written by L. Ron Hubbard. So the church said they were written by L. Ron Hubbard twice. Both they acknowledged that they were real, and then they acknowledged that they were real again, even after they had said that they weren't really L. Ron Hubbard's writings. Now, as far as them not having having Scientology jargon in them or Scientology sounding phrases, Scientology didn't exist when L. Ron Hubbard wrote the Affirmations, so I don't have any reason to think that they should have any Scientology sounding phrases in them. They certainly read like Hubbard's words to me. I mean, I've listened to hundreds of hours of L. Ron Hubbard lecturing and read thousands of pages of the man's works, and I certainly had no problem thinking that that was his work. And when I studied Hubbard's biography, as written by Russell Miller in Barefaced Messiah, and also the biographical material in Piece of Blue Sky by John Atack, as well as all the things I've ever read from Hubbard, it fit into a context that made total sense to me as to, I think it was about 1945 or 46, that he apparently had sat down and wrote those things, was doing them for self-hypnosis. If you haven't seen or heard of anything about the Affirmations, I will post a link to them in the description below here so you can read them for yourself. They feature in a chapter in my book. I do talk about the Affirmations because they are very important. And as I think somebody in that court case back in '84 said, any Scientologist who read them would leave Scientology within 5 minutes. They are shocking. They are really something, these Affirmations. They give you a window into Hubbard's psyche, kind of like nothing else really does. It's really something. So I don't think Jerry's axe to grind and anything having to do with that led to him writing in Hubbard's own handwriting pages and pages and pages of work. And those going into, being read into the court record. I don't think Jerry's the kind of person who would fake something like that. I don't know if he even has the ability to write in Hubbard's handwriting. And even if he does, I don't think his character is such that he would do that. So that's why I think that the Affirmations are totally real. So that's my answer to that question. Elorian. What do you personally think of Marty Rathbun? I am sure when he was in charge of dirty tricks, he did some awful things. To me, he tries to come off as a good guy in a bad situation. Do you think he should tell some of the things he has done? I am not talking like when Scientology screams, "What are your crimes?" I just think he should be honest not only about Miscavige, but what he may have done that he regrets. I like Mark Rathbun. He doesn't go by Marty anymore, so I'm not going to call him that. But I met him. I have nothing but admiration for the guy. Um, I did meet him when I was in the church. He was a scary guy. And I know that he did things that were not very praiseworthy when he was in the Church of Scientology. And I know people that he harmed or saw to it that they were harmed and were affected by his actions or by the actions of the Office of Special Affairs. And that's a rough go, you know, and that situation where he, you know, has harmed people is between him and them. And I know that actions have been taken to, you know, apologize or make restitution or whatever to some degree or another. And I know some people have a real chip on their shoulder about him still and probably will for the rest of their lives. And that's between them and him. It's not my place to judge or look at that and decide who's right and who's wrong, because I'll tell you right now, I don't have enough information to know. And even if I did, what's my opinion, you know? My view about people who did bad things when they were in Scientology and came to their senses and got themselves out, which is what he did, I think that's commendable, because I know the degree of mind control that exists in Scientology, and it's real, and it is strong, and it's not easy to overcome that. What's more, getting out and doing what he's done, which was basically stand up and you know, tell David Miscavige, fuck you, and start up his own practice at first because he still believed in Scientology, and then go through the process of getting it out of his system by realizing that, you know, Hubbard was full of shit. Pardon my French, but, you know, those are the best words to use. That took you know, some guts on his part. It's one thing to recover from a destructive cult. It's another thing to recover from a destructive cult in the public eye and go through the process. And I've done that, and so I know kind of a little bit of what I'm talking about, where I can look back at some of the things I used to say when I first got out and kind of go, ooh, you know, I don't really agree with myself anymore. And I know he feels the same. You know, he used to be a staunch defender of L. Ron Hubbard and Scientology and the technology of Scientology. Now he's not. He's kind of gotten through that process, and I applaud him for that. So, you know, as far as him coming clean on all the horrible things that he did, well, the guy's written 3 books. He's done countless numbers of depositions. He has been interviewed by the FBI. You know, he's spoken with them at length. I know that for a fact. So I don't think he's in a position where he's really hiding out, and I don't think that he looks at himself as a good guy in a bad situation. I don't think he looks at himself that way, because he has specifically stated that he has regrets about things that happened, and I think that he really wishes that his life had not gone in the direction that it went. And now he's kind of hit the reset button on his life, kind of in a similar way to the way I've hit the reset button on mine. He and I were at totally different levels. I was never involved in some of the things he was involved in. But I've looked at it as, you know, how long do you hold something over somebody else's head? How much are they supposed to do before enough is enough? So I look at the things that he's done, which are a lot. You know, the guy has been through hell since he left Scientology. And I go, you know, how much more is the guy supposed to do before he's made up for the damage that he's done? I don't know. I think he's done plenty. And I applaud his efforts and commend him for what he's done. So that's kind of where I'm at on that. If there's more for him to say that I don't know about, well, I hope he says it. You know, I hope it all gets out. And I also know from Mike Rinder and from some other things that I've read that, you know, just because he was in the position that he was in doesn't mean he knows where all the skeletons are buried or what's in all the dirty corners and closets. He doesn't necessarily know that. David Miscavige operates in a very compartmentalized world where, you know, Mr. X knows this much and Mr. Y knows this much, and they never talk. So, you know, he very well could have spilled all the beans on everything that he knows at this point. I'm not sure. So that's kind of what I can say about that. Timothy Baldwin. What does Scientology do with all of that video they have? It would have to be a massive undertaking to archive all of that footage. Yeah, it is. It is a massive undertaking, and they have just this huge storage facility at Hemet, California, at the Gold Base, where they store all that stuff. They have very state-of-the-art digital storage facilities, and they got rows and rows and banks of hard copy, Hubbard's writings and recordings and all that stuff going all the way back. I mean, they got everything there. And it's an extensive collection, but they have just Google, the Gold Base. It's a big place, and they got nothing but people there who've got nothing else to do all day, every day, except, archive that work and work with that stuff. So that's what they do with it. Nilguri. I noticed that you use the word spiritual. For example, L. Ron was deeply troubled mentally and spiritually. I've never really understood what people mean by that. I've heard it described as understanding your place in the universe, which sounds fine, but a bit vague and supernatural. I'd be interested to hear what you meant by that, and especially what you, as a skeptic, understand by the term spiritual. I've said before that I have spiritual beliefs, and that I believe in a spiritual existence. And what that means for me is that I believe that there is more to life than just this. It's a hope that I have. And the spiritual existence for me means a consciousness or an awareness beyond the physicality of what we see around us. And to me, that's what spirituality is. It's not a kismet sort of fate, sort of my place in the universe sort of thing. It's a very real hope that I have that life continues on past the life and death of a body. So it's kind of a sort of a hope of a life force sort of idea, and how that manifests, I don't know. I don't have any kind of particular cosmology worked out. I don't have any kind of idea of heaven or hell or anything like that. My spiritual hopes and beliefs don't conform to or are not in alignment with any any sort of set known organized religion, because I'm still a work in progress on all that kind of stuff. I've come out of Scientology. I'm kind of distrustful of organized religion. I see a need for it. I see that, and by a need for it, I mean I see that people are going to have beliefs regardless of what we ever do about it. People are going to believe stuff no matter what you or I or anybody else ever says or logicals at them or critical thinks at them or tries to convince them otherwise. We all have beliefs, and it's just in their nature to have those. And I think they fill a need for some people. For others, they don't. They don't, in terms of religious beliefs, they don't need religious beliefs in order to be moral or be ethical or live a happy life. Well, some people do. And I wish there was a little bit more understanding about that, actually, between those two parties. Because there's nothing wrong with having beliefs. What there's something's wrong with is acting destructively on those beliefs or trying to hurt other people who have different beliefs. That's where it all goes off the rails. It's not the beliefs, it's what they do with them. That's what's so crazy. So anyway, get myself off my soapbox here. So my spiritual idea, when I use the word spiritual, is I am referring to that idea of the person themselves, as maybe different from their body or their brain or neurons or something like that, because I like to think that there might be a consciousness there that transcends the physical, and that's spirituality to me. And so we've come to the end of another episode. These questions and the comments and everything that you guys leave are great, and I really appreciate them. And I hope you'll continue to leave me more this week. If you have any other questions for me regarding Scientology, critical thinking, me, anything at all, just fire away. Leave them in the comments section or email them to me, and I will get to them eventually. I've got a nice long list of them, and I'm working my way through. I'm working hard on my other projects, my book project and the the other videos I want to get to. I've also got some interviews coming up in the future that I'm lining up. So no shortage of more new Scientology material coming up in the not too distant future here. So until then, I will talk to you guys next week.